Today I'd like to cover the chapter from the book Philothea from St. Francis de Sales. It's from part 4, chapter 3, and it's all about temptations. So the title is The Nature of Temptation and the Difference Between Feeling It and Yielding to It. Represent to yourself a young princess fondly cherished by her husband, against whose virtue some vile person should make an attempt, sending to her a messenger bearing his hateful overtures. First of all, the messenger would lay his master's propositions before the princess. Secondly, she would either give or refuse him audience. And thirdly, she would either consent or reject him. So when Satan, the world, and the flesh behold a soul espoused to the Son of God, they ply her with suggestions and temptations by which firstly sin is set before her, secondly she either takes pleasure in it or the reverse, and thirdly she either consents or turns away, which in fact are the 3 degrees by which we fall into sin: temptation, delectation, and consent. And although these 3 steps may not be so obvious in every ordinary sin, they are palpably evident in great and heinous sins. Even supposing that temptation to some particular sin were to last our whole life, it would not render us odious in the sight of God, so long as we neither took pleasure therein, nor yielded our consent, and that because in temptation we are not active but passive, and whereas we take no delight therein, neither can we partake of any guilt. St. Paul was grievously tormented by the messenger of Satan, a thorn in his flesh. In the book, the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 12, verse 7. But far from being displeasing to God, he was the rather glorified therein. The holy Angèle de Foligno, who was so torn with carnal temptations that we cannot hear of them unmoved, and so grievous were the temptations with which assailed St. Francis and St. Benedict, that the one cast himself amidst thorns, and the other into snow in order to allay them. Nevertheless, they lost nothing of the grace of God thereby, but rather grew in it exceedingly. You must then be brave amidst temptation, and never imagine yourself to be conquered so long as they are displeasing to you, keeping clearly in mind the difference between feeling them and consenting to them. This means that you may feel them while they displease you, but you cannot consent to them except they please you, since taking pleasure therein is the ordinary step towards consent. So then, the enemies of our salvation may offer us as many lures and snares as they will, may even be watching to effect an entrance into our hearts, may make what overtures they please, but so long as we have the resolution to take no pleasure therein, we shall no more offend God than the princess, whom I brought forward as an example, would offend her husband, while she took no delight in the propositions she received. There is, however, one difference between the princess and our soul. The former, when she has heard the vile proposition, can banish the messenger and hear no more of it. But the soul is not always able to banish temptation, although she is always able to refuse consent. Therefore, however long our temptation endures, so long as we detest it, we shall be uninjured. But as to the satisfaction which may ensue upon temptation, inasmuch as our soul has 2 natures, one inferior, the other superior, and the former will not always obey the latter, but takes its own course. So sometimes the inferior takes pleasure in temptation without the consent and contrary to the will of the superior. This is that contest and war to which St. Paul alludes when he says that the flesh lusteth against the spirit, in the letter to the Galatians, chapter 5, verse 17, and that he sees a law in his members fighting against the law of his mind, the letter to the Romans, chapter 7, verse 23. Did you ever observe a large fire heaping up with cinders? If some 10 or 12 hours afterwards you seek the fire, you will barely find a lingering spark in the center of the hearth, and that with difficulty. But since you can discover it, there is undoubtedly some fire left, and it will suffice to rekindle the extinguished fuel. So is it with charity, which is our spiritual life, amidst great and pressing temptations. Temptation exercising its attraction on the inferior nature, as it were, buries the soul in ashes and seemingly extinguishes the love of God, for it is nowhere to be seen, save in the center and depth of the heart, and even there it is hard to find. Nevertheless, there it is, since although our whole soul and body are disturbed, we still persevere in the resolution not to consent to sin or temptation. And that attraction which gratifies the outward man displeases the inner man, and although it surrounds our will, it has not effected an entrance into it. We see that this attraction is involuntary, and therefore not sinful. We pray that we can always keep a firm resolution, have a strong will to never take pleasure in anything that would be offensive to God. And we ask that our Blessed Mother Mary, our Heavenly Mother, that she always surround us with her mantle of protection, and that Saint Joseph, our dear Father, may crush also the devil and the demons in their attempts to bring us away from the will of God and from growth into sanctity. And Saint Michael the Archangel is also a great companion and friend, our guardian angel. And we should never start the day without calling out to all of these, our powerful helpers and intercessors. God bless.